If there's one thing Nintendo is known for, it's video games. Well, duh. But if there's another thing they're known for, it's the consoles that you play these games on. Well, duh. But recently, I've been thinking about what the best Nintendo console is, and that's what spawned the idea for this video. I saw my friend DK Matt make this kind of video, and it got me thinking, which is, well, it led to where we are today. We are going to be ranking every Nintendo console and handheld to ever exist, starting from the Nintendo Entertainment System, going all the way to the modern day with the Nintendo Switch. The way I'm going to be ranking these consoles is pretty simple: the game libraries and my personal feelings. There are other smaller factors that can play into my rankings, things like hardware specs and the controllers used to play the games, but those are so minuscule to the point where I literally don't talk about them. This is me after writing the script. I don't know why I put this here. I don't mention anything else. So before we get into it, if you could kindly like the video and subscribe to the channel. We're trying to get to 5,000 subscribers by the end of this year, and I would love to see you all there. I also have a brand new gaming channel called The Dreamcast, made with a bunch of my friends that you could check out if you want something to giggle at for a little while. But with that out of the way, let's get into the ranking. Coming in last place, we have the Game Boy. Look, I don't really have anything against the Game Boy. I think it has some pretty good games, and I think it's pretty impressive that Nintendo, even at their lowest in my opinion, still has really good games. My favorite games from this generation consist of the Pokemon games, the Super Mario Land 2, The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, along with the Oracle games and Wario Lands 1 through 3. I'm not the biggest fan of how the Game Boy feels in the hands, but being able to play most of these games on Nintendo Switch Online really breathes new life into them. None of these games are the longest, which, makes sense. This is a very primitive system. You're able to beat Mario Land 2 in like an hour or so, but that's perfectly okay. This is one of my favorite Mario platformers to come back to because it's so easy to just pick up and play. Same thing with The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, although I've only played and beaten the remake on Switch, so I'm not sure if that would really count. That doesn't bump the Game Boy up any points, unfortunately, as every other console and handheld on this list are just, wow, they're just miles better than anything the original Game Boy had to offer. So with that said, let's move on. Up next, we have the direct successor of the Game Boy, the Game Boy Advance. Now, I know what a lot of people are thinking with this one. How dare someone put the Game Boy Advance at the bottom next to the original Game Boy? I know the Game Boy Advance has its defenders, but you also gotta understand that the jump of quality from the Game Boy to the Advance is quite a ton in my opinion. The only big thing that drags it down this much for me is that I'm just not the biggest fan of a lot of these games. The Legend of Zelda Minish Cap is here, and I have a lot of good memories playing that game emulated on my school Chromebook in the 7th grade, but it's nowhere near one of my favorite Zelda games. Same thing with the Pokemon titles. Although we do have some great games here like the Sonic Advance Trilogy, the first WarioWare game, Wario Land 4, one of the best Nintendo platformers to date, Metroid Fusion and Zero Mission, and of course, Mother 3 for anyone outside of America. I do think it's bizarre how we never got a proper Mario platformer on this system. We only got remakes of older titles instead of a new game, but I think Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga makes up for it tenfold. Love that game. Up next might be a controversial take, but we have the NES. This is the console that saved gaming in America. This console is him. Simply put, this is what revived gaming in the West, and the games here are pretty good to boot. The highlights of this generation include Super Mario Bros., Super Mario Bros. 3, one of the best platformers to this very day somehow, Duck Hunt, Excite Bike, The Legend of Zelda, and many others. Now, I was debating for a long time where to put the NES's library because in my opinion, a lot of these games just didn't age very well. It's not like a hot take or anything either. Now, it's like, I wouldn't say they aged like milk, but this was a primitive era, not only for Nintendo, but for gaming as a whole. We were still in the infancy of gaming, so most of the games featured are very arcade-like, and by arcade-like, I meant a lot of them are pretty hard. Contra, super difficult. Super Mario Bros. 2 didn't even release in the West because of its difficulty, but the few games that saved it from being at the bottom were the Mega Man games. I love Mega Man. I love Mega Man. Mega Man 1, Mega Man 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are not only the best games on the NES, but some of my favorite games of all time. You can beat these games in like an hour if you know what you're doing, and the runs never get old. My first experience with Mega Man was with Mega Man 2 on the Virtual Console for the 3DS, and and I played that game for just an unbelievable amount of hours. I can go back to the original 6 games any day of the week and have an amazing time no matter what. Not only that, but these games still have an amazing soundtrack for games that came out in the 1980s. These games hold the test of time. Mega Man Legacy Collection is only like $15 on every platform out there. Genuinely, one of the best collections of all time. Do yourself a favor and give those games a play if you haven't. The DS is a great console. Let's just get that out of the way. I love the DS. It was one of the first consoles I ever owned. I can't even begin to express how many hours I poured into Pokemon Black 2 and Pokemon White 2. To this day, my favorite Pokemon games. The system was it. We have entered the territory of really great libraries, and what better ways to start off than the DS. The highlights for me were the Sinnoh and Unova Pokemon games, in my opinion the 2 best generations, Super Mario 64 DS, the Zelda games, Sonic and Rush Adventure, and so much more. These are a lot of games, like where do I even begin? For one, the DS was my childhood. I remember walking out in the trailer park trading Pokemon with my friends to see how big we could fill our Pokedex. We used to trade games all the time, constantly making me wonder which games were originally mine and which were Marshall's and Corbin's or Chance's. I haven't seen those guys in about a decade since I moved away. Good times. The point I'm trying to make here is that I have some fantastic memories with this console, and that's only hammered home by the fantastic library that it boasts. This is where Pokemon peaked as a franchise, and that can't be understated. Truth be told, I had a lot of trouble trying to figure out where to put the Nintendo 64 on this list, because the library, wow, it isn't very big. Only 388 games were released for this thing, and the amount of games I like from this system are much lower. But believe me when I tell you, when these games hit, oh my goodness, they really hit. The highlights from this generation being Super Mario 64, Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, Mario Party 1 through 3, the original Smash Bros, and Mario Kart 64. I have a lot of old memories of going to my aunt's house and fighting Super Smash Bros on the N64, and just, wow, that game it blew my mind. I guess the best way I could possibly describe this console is that it's not about the amount of games, but their quality, because Super Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time combined are just some of my favorite games of all time, and I say that, and I've said it a lot in this video already, even with the Mega Man games, but like this time, I really mean it. They're on equal footing for me. I love these games equally, and they are the sole reason the N64 is this high up on the list, because without these games, I have no idea where I would place it. The impact the N64 had on this generation is absolutely staggering. Nintendo just casually revolutionized gaming again and again, and they just made it look easy. And I'll be completely honest here, there's not a lick of nostalgia bias included in these games either. I actually really did not like Mario 64 for the longest time and refused to touch it. I thought it had the worst controls, camera, everything in a 3D Mario game that others like Mario Galaxy and 3D World just did so much better. The same thing with Ocarina of Time. I never hated the game per se, but the first time I beat the game, I was rushing through my experience rather than enjoying it. This year, when I started my channel, I actually took the time to go through both of these games yet again, and just found one of the best gaming experiences ever. Hell, I got very teary-eyed when I finished Mario 64, as I made the goal to not only beat the game, but beat the game once I had every star. I also made videos about my experiences on those games, so go check those out if you're interested. But yeah, those 2 games alone carried this generation for me. Up next is the Wii U. This console marked a huge chapter of my life and is a console I'll never forget. My dad bought me this console when I was living with him for a while, and I could just never put it down. I was 10 at the time and I wasn't really paying any mind at how Nintendo was doing as a company. I was in the camp and thought the Wii U was just a new controller for the Wii, but when I got my hands on the console, I never let go. This console is where I got my start on the Xenoblade Chronicles series with Xenoblade X, a game that I have poured countless hours into with one of my old friends. Splatoon is another franchise that I look back so fondly at. This series made me love online shooters. I was a day one Splatoon fan. It was one of the first games I ever pre-ordered. I loved this franchise before it got annoying to say that I love the franchise. The highlights, as I previously stated, are Xenoblade Chronicles X, Splatoon, Nintendo Land, Super Mario 3D World, Super Smash Bros., which has one of my favorite character reveals of all time in Mega Man. The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker and Twilight Princess remasters, and Mario Kart 8. To this day, the best Mario Kart game. This generation is definitely defined by the quality of its titles, and yeah, it wasn't the greatest console of all time, but the hours I spent in all of the games I listed can't be understated. Adding the Zelda remasters they're a bit dodgy, as that muddies up the ground between what counts as a game from that generation, but these are games I first experienced on my Wii U, and I think there were enough changes to the main game that they still count in the end. Like, I'm not even joking, the fast sale in Wind Waker HD saved my enjoyment because I was really hating exploration beforehand, but the fast sale, that made things so much more fun. Sure, I never beat either of those games when I first played them, but this year I actually sat my ass down and beat both for the first time, and then they were just magical experiences. Again, I made videos on said experiences as well, so if you're a Zelda fan of any kind, I highly recommend you check that out. God, I'm plugging a lot of in this video. Regardless of what most people would say back then and even today, the Wii U will always hold a very special place in my heart as one of my favorite gaming consoles of all time. Oh, and I heavily recommend modding your Wii U. It's one of the best investments I've ever made, and it's shockingly easy to do. The Super Nintendo, what an amazing console. Along with the GameCube, it's one of the first gaming consoles I ever played. I was at my grandma's house when I found this thing. I was like 5 or something, but I found this little straw box and it kept grabbing my attention. I wanted to open it so bad, but I thought if I did, I would get in trouble and get my ass beat. A few months later, I actually mustered up the courage to do so, and there it was. The Super Nintendo Mini and one game that came with it. Yoshi's Island. The highlights are Yoshi's Island, Super Mario World, Super Metroid, Donkey Kong Country, Earthbound, Mega Man 7, Mega Man X 1 through 3, and Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. Oh boy, Yoshi's Island is great. That was also the only SNES game I played for a very long time because nobody sold SNES games anymore. But that definitely didn't stop me. That definitely didn't stop me. I love you, underpowered PCs. Mwah. Kiss. I highly believe that the SNES has one of the most consistent libraries out of any of the ones I'm talking about today. I may not have been alive to see this generation in its heyday, but I still managed to play these games throughout my life, and, well, these are just some of the most consistently great games. Not much more I can say on this thing. Let's continue. The GameCube holds a very special place in my heart for many reasons. The biggest one being that it was the first console I ever played, well, anything on. The first games I ever played were Luigi's Mansion and Sonic Heroes, games I still love and play to this day. When you're a kid with limited internet access, you don't typically lean into what people say there. I grew up where online forums were still popular, but I never really paid attention to them. Was the GameCube a flop? I don't know, and to be fair, I didn't really care. I loved every second that I played on this thing. Mario Sunshine, Mario Kart Double Dash, Metroid Prime, F-Zero GX, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, Luigi's Mansion, Sonic Heroes, Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, Sonic Mega Collection. I like that one. That's nostalgia incarnate for me. Wario World, Super Smash Bros. Melee, and of course, The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, a game that I could never get into as a kid until I beat it this year and got really jealous about how I neglected it for so long. I get that people hated the style of Wind Waker when it first came out, especially knowing what we saw at Space World. This is very common knowledge, very tip of the iceberg kind of stuff, but man, this game fucking rules. I mean, it's not the hardest nor the most thought-provoking Zelda game. Hell, I'd call it one of the easiest, but this is just an easy favorite of mine. A common complaint is the backtracking in games like Wind Waker and even Metroid Prime, which I do understand can get very tedious. Like, let's not even beat around the bush here. A lot, if not most of the first-party GameCube titles were very rushed to meet deadlines, and that caused a lot of corners to get cut along the way, and you could just tell when the developers are padding a game out. I love Wind Waker, and I even like the Triforce quest, but it's obviously padding. Same thing with Metroid Prime. Luigi's Mansion has you running around everywhere for Mario's clothing, but that's nowhere near as bad considering the mansion is quite small. Sonic Heroes, while not even being a GameCube exclusive, has you play the game 4 times to collect all the Chaos Emeralds, and only then can you beat the final boss, which is really cool. Love that game. There was a lot of work that could have been done with the GameCube, but in all honesty, these games are still amazing and it's much deserving of the number 4 spot. Boy, do I love the 3DS. I've had one for as long as I can remember. Not only do I love the 3DS, but it has one of my favorite gaming libraries of all time that should be self-explanatory at this point. We're like at, what, the number 3 spot? This thing was revolutionary. One of my biggest issues with the base DS was the lack of actual 3D games. Super Mario 64 was the perfect showcase of what was possible on the DS, but we really never got anything like it again. The 3DS, while it still had some missed opportunities, still had amazing games. The highlights are Super Mario 3D Land, Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask 3D, A Link Between Worlds, Samus Returns, WarioWare Gold, Pokemon Gen 6 and the Hoenn remakes, Sonic Generations, Xenoblade Chronicles 3D, a technical marvel that they squeezed this game on there, Luigi's Mansion 2, Tomodachi Life, Miitopia, and so much more. That's a lot of games. Now, the 3DS started off pretty weak. Probably one of the weakest launches in Nintendo history. Bad pricing, poor launch titles, it wasn't looking good for the 3DS. But then you look at the complete library after all is said and done and just, wow. The library is pretty damn good. This system is what reintroduced me into Zelda and made it one of my favorite franchises of all time. A lot of longtime viewers know I used to hate Zelda growing up. I could never get past the beginning of Twilight Princess, and that turned me off from the franchise for a very long time, and it wouldn't be until 2015 before I would dive back into Zelda with Majora's Mask 3D, and wow, what a game.
What a game, yo!
I absolutely fell in love with Zelda as a whole from here. The puzzle solving, the overall premise, it all just clicked with me and led me into diving further into Zelda. Ocarina of Time 3D, Triforce Heroes was a lot of fun when it was online, and of course, A Link Between Worlds. This is my favorite 2D Zelda game to date. The puzzle solving has its highs and its lows, but the 3D wall merging mechanic offered so many fun ways to traverse dungeons and the like. Of course, we also got our first 3D Pokemon games on this system. I have poured countless hours into Pokemon X and Y. Probably the last good generation, I would say, and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire were damn near perfect remakes. I also have so many memories with the eShop on this thing. It may seem insignificant in hindsight, but I was a poor kid, so if I was bored with the games I had, I would boot up the eShop and look for any kind of demos to play and learn how to conserve the few plays I could get from them. I love the layout of the eShop, and the old music is absolutely seared into my brain like the crust on a steak. A track that I associate with the world I grew up in. From original titles to remakes and remasters, the 3DS is kind of a GOAT and more than deserving of the number 3 spot. And now we've reached what are, in my opinion, the greatest Nintendo consoles to date. To nobody's surprise, I'm sure, the Nintendo Switch and the Nintendo Wii. Not only are these the best consoles in Nintendo's history, it shows as they're the best-selling consoles over on Nintendo's side, and the Switch is on track to overtake the PS2 as the highest-selling console ever. But which one is superior? Let's find out, starting with the Wii. I have just about as much nostalgia for the Wii as I do the GameCube or 3DS. This system was absolutely integral to me as a child and is still one of my favorite consoles to date. Again, why do I write that in the script? The viewer can pick up, it's so redundant. It was a very unique and bold move from Nintendo to release a console so underpowered and gimmicky as the Wii, especially when we had systems like the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 at the time. What was it about the Wii that made it so damn good? Well, most will tell you that it simply appealed to everybody, which is true, but come on, it's the games. We're talking about the games here. The console had so many games, it's insane to think about. Other systems like the DS and 3DS were compatible with the previous generations respectively, but the Wii was also a GameCube which nearly doubles the amount of greatness this system has. Let's run down the list, shall we? It's quite a long one. Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword, Super Smash Bros. Brawl, Donkey Kong Country Returns, Mario Kart Wii, Kirby's Return to Dreamland and Kirby's Epic Yarn, Animal Crossing City Folk, Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, WarioWare Smooth Moves, Wario Land Shake It, Sonic Colors, and one of the greatest games of all time, Xenoblade Chronicles. What a stacked library. The games that define a Nintendo generation are the heavy hitters, your Marios and your Zelda, and both franchises got 2 new entries during this generation. Twilight Princess might be the most inconsistent Zelda game, but it has some of the best dungeon design and puzzle solving in any Zelda game period. Skyward Sword is a misunderstood gem with one of the best Zelda stories to date. Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 are simply masterpieces from top to bottom. These games are amazing, and as I've already stated, the list just goes on. The Wii is where Xenoblade Chronicles, my favorite gaming series of all time, got its start, and yeah, I'm not the first to admit that the remaster is leagues better on the Switch, but we wouldn't have that game if not for the Wii's original title and Project Rainfall. While the motion controls were forced in a lot of games, I have to give credit where it's due, as the concept of the Wii Remote in general is simply amazing. It's so easy to pick up and play. Being able to use motion as a gimmick worked so well for so many, and to this day, we haven't seen a controller that could replicate the nuance of the Wii Remote. Hey look, I did mention the controllers, hey look at that. And even back in the day, you couldn't beat that price point. Honestly, I should just put the Wii U at this spot since it has the entirety of the Wii's library available on it, but that would be cheating. At the time of writing and uploading this video, the Switch is pretty much at the end of its life cycle and we're preparing for the launch of its successor next year in 2025. I would say that we have already got the majority of heavy hitters in our library and there wouldn't be any more big titles, but of course as we think that Nintendo casually drops a brand new 2D Zelda, new Mario Party, the revival of the Mario and Luigi series, and Metroid Prime's reveal, like okay, Nintendo has gone all out with the Switch, and this is the console I've definitely spent the most time with, as it's the first console I bought while having a job, and they weren't lying. Unlike the PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 5 Pro, Nintendo Switch has games. One more time, everybody. Let's go through the list. Super Mario Odyssey, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door Remake, Super Mario Wonder, Bowser's Fury, Luigi's Mansion 3, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, Echoes of Wisdom, The Link's Awakening Remake, Hyrule Warriors: Age of Calamity, Kirby and the Forgotten Game, Fire Emblem Three Houses and Engage, Metroid Dread, and eventually Metroid Prime 4, Animal Crossing: New Horizons, Splatoon 2 and 3, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Pokemon Legends Arceus. Out of all the Pokemon games on Switch, this is sadly the only good one and the greatest gaming trilogy of all time, Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and 3. What's crazy is that I know for a fact I missed a lot of games. Look, I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it or try to hide it. The Nintendo Switch is easily the best Nintendo console, and it's hard to say that it's recency bias. This thing has been out for a very long time now, a week before my 13th birthday when it was released, to be exact, and well, it's safe to say that I'm not 13 anymore. Yeah, it's been a long time. I love the Nintendo Switch. This console is what made me love and appreciate gaming so much during my life. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild completely redefining a genre, shaking up what it means to be an open world game. Super Mario Wonder is the best 2D Mario game to date, utilizing so many creative and amazing ideas, like there isn't a single boring level in that game. Smash Bros. Ultimate tore the community apart in ways thought unimaginable, all because two of my favorite characters were included. This game's sporting a massive, damn impressive roster for any fighting game. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is, in my opinion, the best racing game of all time and somehow rose above a simple re-release with a DLC pack that doubled the track count. As someone who loved the original Splatoon on Wii U, seeing the series have this massive of an appeal on a console that's successful warms my heart. And of course I can't forget Xenoblade Chronicles, single-handedly the greatest gaming franchise of all time. These games have changed the trajectory of my life, and honestly, I don't know where I'd be without them. Well, I'll save my full thoughts for when I drop my, albeit very long retrospectives on each game, because we're going to be here for hours regardless. A common complaint I've seen with the Switch is that it's underpowered, and to me, that's such a non-complaint. I mean, while yes, we aren't going to receive any masterpieces like Red Dead Redemption 2 on the console, well, yet, I think that's totally fine. Nintendo has proved time and time again that you don't need to have the best graphics or the highest fidelity to make good games. Too many times have they proved that. Even on a console like the Wii U, they're still innovating and creating amazing experiences, and with the mass appeal of the Switch, this only hammers in the idea that Nintendo knows what they're doing. And to think that I only named games on this list that you can find only on the Switch itself, this isn't even scratching the surface of how many great games are on Switch, let alone mentioning the multi-platform games that were practically made for the Switch. The Switch has been my favorite console for a long time, and it probably will remain my favorite console for years to come, unless the Switch 2 just blows me out of the water and has backwards compatibility, which probably it will, so, you know, But otherwise, that is my complete ranking on all of the Nintendo Switch consoles and handhelds. Well, what's your favorite Nintendo console? Let me know down in the comments below. Make sure to follow my socials. I have a Discord where I'm pretty active in there, along with my friends Big Sleater and DK Matt. The link to those will be in the description down below. My name is Dylonic, and I will see you all in the next video. Take it easy and stay fresh.
Oh, yeah.
Yes! Oh, how do I fly?
Jump.
Okay.
Okay, actually don't die, cause like...
But I still have 2 more jars of pickles.
Give it to him. Give it to him now!
Okay, I got it. I don't.
Dylan, you son of a...
What did you do? How did you do that?
Oh my God.